It seems like AI is just everywhere you look these days. ChatGPT, writing poetry, DeepSeek composing music, it's really mind-blowing. But here's something I've been wondering. Why hasn't South Korea, a country that's really known for being great at tech, why haven't they created their own big AI star?
That's a really good question, actually. And to kind of figure out the answer to that, we're going to take a deep dive today into some Korean news analysis and some statistics reports. And it turns out it's not really just one simple answer. There are a lot of different factors involved.
Okay, so let's try to untangle all of that. Where should we even start?
Well, it might surprise you, but South Korea is dealing with a pretty big shortage of AI specialists. Like, the reports that we looked at say that only around 6% of all their science and engineering PhD grads specialize in AI. So if you compare that to the US or India, which have these huge pools of talent, you can see the challenge right away.
6%. Wow, that's a really small number, especially when you think about how much demand there is for AI experts around the world. It's like you're trying to create a world-class soccer team, but you only have a tiny group of players to choose from.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even tougher because a lot of their really talented AI people are getting these offers from companies in other countries, companies that have more money and maybe even more interesting projects. So, it's like a classic brain drain situation.
So not enough players, and the ones they do have are getting recruited to other teams. That's already 2 strikes against them, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just that, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Think of AI development like you're trying to build a really high-tech race car. You got to have a super powerful engine, right? Well, in the AI world, that engine is a high-performance GPU. And these things cost tens of thousands of dollars ECH.
Okay, so now we're talking some serious money. How expensive are we talking here?
We'll take the NVIDIA H100, for example. It's like top of the line, essential for AI development. And it costs something like $50 million. That's about 37,000 US dollars. And that's just for one of them.
Are you serious? I knew they were expensive, but that's crazy. No wonder the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry found that, the lack of good IT infrastructure and just the high costs are the biggest things holding businesses back from really getting into AI. I think they said that almost 35% of businesses said it was the infrastructure, and then another 23% said it was the cost.
And it's not only businesses, research institutions are having a tough time too. They need these powerful GPUs to keep up. But with research and development budgets getting cut back in 2024, universities and research labs just couldn't buy as many.
So it's kind of like they're trying to compete in this Formula One race, but they can't even afford the tires, let alone the engine.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you add on top of that the whole issue of investment disparity.
Right. I was reading about that. Global tech companies are putting more than 20% of what they make into research and development for AI. Are South Korean companies keeping up with that at all?
Sadly, not really. There seems to be some hesitation among South Korean companies to put in the same level of investment as these big international companies. And because of that, they're at a real disadvantage in the global market for these things called large language models, or LLMs, as they're called in the AI world.
Wait, hold on a sec. Can you explain what LLMs are exactly?
Oh, sure. Think of them like the brains behind AI stuff like ChatGPT. They're these complex algorithms that are trained on tons and tons of data so they can understand and then generate text that sounds like a human wrote it. They're basically the foundation for a ton of AI things, like chatbots and content creation tools.
Got it. So South Korea is not really in that game then?
They're trying to be, but they're definitely behind. For example, Kakao, which is a major tech company in South Korea, they've actually had to scale back what they were doing with AI. They're facing some legal risks, and it's hard to get the money they need to keep up with these giants.
And what about other companies like Never? Are they doing any better?
Well, Naver's working on improving the AI models that they already have. But it's a tough battle. They're going up against Google and Microsoft, who are putting billions into AI development. It's just not a fair fight when it comes to resources.
So we've got a talent shortage, expensive hardware, and not enough investment. Doesn't sound very good for South Korea's AI dreams.
It's definitely a challenge. There's no doubt about that. But before we give up on them entirely, let's see how another major player is tackling this AI race. China.
Oh, yeah. China's going all in on AI, right? I read that the government in Shanghai started this huge investment fund for AI.
Yeah, that's right. Back in July of 2024, they said they were creating a fund with $100 billion, all for AI development. That's like 13.8 billion US dollars. It's a pretty clear sign that they want to be the world leader in artificial intelligence.
Wow. That's serious money. So what exactly are they using all that money for?
Pretty much everything AI you can think of. developing their own AI chips and software, pushing the boundaries of stuff like self-driving cars and robots. They want to build a whole AI ecosystem from scratch.
Sounds like they're taking a very different approach than South Korea.
Totally different. South Korea is being more cautious. They're letting the market guide them. But China's government is basically saying, full speed ahead, we're going to be #1 in AI.
It'll be interesting to see how these two different approaches work out over the next few years.
So we've got these two very different ways of doing AI. One's driven by private companies and the other's driven by the government. And that brings up a really important question. What does it actually take to win in this global AI race? Is it just about throwing tons of money at it and developing things as fast as possible, or is there another way?
That is a great question. And it's something that we're going to keep talking about in the next part of our deep dive. So we were just talking about China and how their government is just pouring money into AI. It's like they're playing a totally different game than South Korea.
It really is a different approach. But before we get too focused on what China's doing, let's get back to South Korea. Because even with all the challenges we've talked about, there are some signs that things might be looking up.
Oh, okay, I'm listening. What's making you feel hopeful?
Well, one thing that's been interesting to see is how much interest there is in these open source AI models, especially one called DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, that's the one that was made by a Chinese startup company, right?
Yep, that's the one. And what's really cool about it is that DeepSeek is actually proving to be a real competitor to models like ChatGPT, even though it wasn't made by one of those huge tech companies with billions of dollars.
So it's like the little guy taking on the giants of the AI world.
Exactly. And that's why people in South Korea are so excited about DeepSeek, because it shows that you don't necessarily need a ton of money and resources to build a successful AI model.
I could see why that would be appealing to South Korean companies.
Yeah.
They could use DeepSeek's open source framework to speed up their own AI development without spending a fortune.
Exactly. By using the knowledge and the code from an open source project like DeepSeek, South Korean companies can jump over some of those early hurdles and just focus on making the model fit their specific needs.
Sounds like a pretty smart plan. But how good are these open source models really? Can they really compete with the big players?
Well, DeepSeek and other open source models might not have the same kind of massive resources behind them, but they're catching up really quickly. When it comes to what they can do, they're almost equal to the big closed source models. And in some cases, they're even better.
Wow, that's impressive. So this whole open source thing could really change the game for South Korea.
It could. It's a way to make things a little more fair, so smaller companies and research groups can get involved in AI without needing to invest huge amounts of money up front.
But even with these open source models, don't you still need people who really know what they're doing to make them work?
Oh, absolutely. Open source doesn't mean easy. You still need skilled engineers and data scientists who can understand the code, fine-tune the models, and make them work with different applications.
So it's not like a magic solution, but it's a really powerful tool if you know how to use it.
Right. And that's where the South Korean government needs to step in.
Okay, so we talked about the government before, but how does that relate to this open source idea?
Think about it this way. Open source is like getting the blueprints to build something amazing. But you still need the construction workers and the materials to actually build it.
I see what you mean. So the government can be important in creating a good environment for AI to grow, even if they're not the ones paying for the models themselves.
Exactly. They can put money into building infrastructure, supporting education and training programs for AI, and making policies that encourage people to share data and work together.
So it's more about making the right conditions for AI to succeed instead of trying to control everything about how it's developed.
Right. And one of the biggest areas where the government needs to help is with computing power. We talked before about how ridiculously expensive those high-performance GPUs are. Well, the government could help make those more available.
You mean like setting up giant server farms full of those crazy expensive GPUs and letting researchers and companies use them?
That's one way to do it. They could also give money to companies that are investing in AI infrastructure or give them tax breaks. The main thing is to make it easier and cheaper to get access to those resources.
Makes sense. But what about the data? AI models are only as good as the data they learn from, right?
You're exactly right. And the government can do a lot to help with that. They can encourage people to share data and create a better system for managing data. Think of it like a public library. But instead of books, it's full of huge sets of data that researchers and companies can use to train their AI models.
I like that analogy. So even though South Korea is facing some big challenges in this AI race, they're not totally out of it. They just need to make the right moves.
Exactly. They've got a lot going for them. They've got smart people, a good tech infrastructure, and a culture that's open to new ideas.
And now with these open source models like DeepSeek, they've got a new weapon in their arsenal.
Definitely. It's going to be really interesting to see how they use these opportunities to make their mark on the world of AI.
So we've talked about the problems, the possible solutions, and what might be next for AI in South Korea. But there's one more thing we should talk about, the human side of all this.
Yeah, that's important. It's easy to get caught up in all the technical stuff and forget that AI is ultimately about how it affects people's lives. And in South Korea, where technology is such a big part of everyday life, those effects are going to be even bigger.
So where do we start with that? What parts of people's lives are being changed the most by AI in South Korea?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is what's going to happen to jobs. As AI gets more advanced, it can do more and more things that humans used to do. And that's happening in all kinds of industries, from factories to customer service.
I get it. It's pretty scary to think about robots taking over our jobs. But is it really that straightforward? Is AI just replacing jobs, or is there something else going on?
It's definitely more complicated than just saying AI equals lost jobs. While it's true that some jobs are going away because of automation, AI is also creating new jobs, especially in fields like AI development, data science, and anything related to AI services.
There's kind of like a two-sided coin. On one side, AI is automating things and making some jobs disappear. But on the other side, it's creating new jobs that need different skills.
Exactly. The important thing to remember is that the job market is changing and people need to change with it. You can't just rely on the skills you learned in school or early in your career anymore. You need to keep learning and updating your skills if you want to stay relevant in this new economy where AI is so important.
That makes a lot of sense. So what specific skills should people be learning? Is it all about coding, or are there other broader skills that will be important?
Well, technical skills are definitely important, especially if you want to work directly with AI development. But there are also a lot of transferable skills that will be really valuable as AI becomes more common. Skills like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, communication, and emotional intelligence.
So it's not like the focus is shifting away from just knowing the technical stuff to having a wider range of skills that machines can't really copy.
That's right. Machines are great at doing the same thing over and over again and processing data, but they're still not very good at things that need human judgment, empathy, and creativity. Those are the areas where humans will always have an advantage, and those are the skills we need to focus on developing.
So how do we get ready for this change? If we know these are the skills that will be important in the future, how do we make sure people have access to the education and training they need?
That's a big question, and it's one that people in charge of education and workforce development all over the world are trying to figure out. It means we need to change how we think about education. We need to move away from old-fashioned ways of learning that just focus on memorizing things and taking tests, and start focusing more on personalized learning that encourages creativity, critical thinking, and being a lifelong learner.
It sounds like we need a major update to our whole education system. But it also sounds kind of exciting. It's a chance to create a system that's actually good at preparing students for the future.
Absolutely. It's a big challenge, but it's super important. The way we work is changing, and we need to make sure everyone can keep up.
Well said. So we've talked about how AI affects jobs and education. Are there any other ways it's changing society that we should be thinking about?
One thing that's really important to think about is the ethics of AI. As AI systems get more powerful and more common, we need to make sure we're developing and using them in a responsible way.
I know what you mean. There are a lot of worries about bias in AI privacy issues and the possibility that it could be used for bad things.
Those are all valid concerns. We need to be really careful to make sure that AI is developed and used in a way that benefits everyone in society and doesn't make existing inequalities worse or violate basic human rights.
So it's not just about building cool technology. It's about thinking about the bigger picture and making sure AI is used for good.
You got it. It takes a lot of different people working together, not just the tech people, but also ethicists, policymakers, and the public. We need to have open and honest conversations about the risks and the benefits of AI and work together to make sure AI is used ethically and responsibly.
That's a really powerful message. And it reminds us that the future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something that we create through the choices we make, the things we do, and our collective wisdom.
I couldn't have said it better myself. The future of AI isn't something that's going to happen to us. It's something we build together.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into South Korea's journey into the world of AI. We've talked about the technical hurdles, the economic factors, and the huge impact it's having on society. But one thing's for sure, this is just the beginning for South Korea.
Definitely. It's a story full of challenges and opportunities and a lot of potential. And it's a story that's relevant to everyone, not just in South Korea.
So for our listeners, what's the one big thing they should take away from all this?
Here's something to think about as we wrap up. South Korea's experience is a valuable lesson for all of us as individuals and as a global society as we figure out how to navigate this new world of artificial intelligence. Their challenges are our challenges, their opportunities are our opportunities, and their future is connected to our own.
That's a great point to end on. We're all in this together, and the choices we make now will determine what kind of future we create with AI. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions. Okay, so we spent a lot of time in this deep dive really digging into how South Korea is doing with AI, all the technical stuff, the money side of things, and how they compare to places like China. But now let's talk about something even more important, the human side of it all.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get so focused on the technology that we forget that AI is really about how it affects people. And in South Korea, where tech is such a big part of life, those effects are probably going to be even stronger.
So where do we even begin with that? Like, what parts of everyday life in South Korea are being changed the most by AI?
Well, one of the biggest things people are worried about is what's going to happen to jobs. As AI systems keep getting smarter, they're able to do more and more of the things that humans used to do. And that's happening all over the place, in factories and customer service, everywhere.
Yeah, it's a scary thought, isn't it? Robots taking our jobs. But is it really that simple? Is AI just going to replace all the jobs, or is there more to it?
It's definitely more complicated than just saying AI equals no jobs. Yeah, some jobs are being replaced by automation, that's true. But AI is also creating new jobs, especially in areas like, developing AI data science, all those kinds of things.
So it's kind of a trade-off then. AI takes away some jobs, but it creates new ones that need different skills.
Exactly. The key is that the job market's changing and people need to change too. You can't just rely on what you learned in school or when you first started working. You got to keep learning new things and updating your skills if you want to keep up in this new AI world.
That makes sense. So what kinds of skills should people be focusing on? Is it all about coding? Are there other things that will be important too?
Well, knowing how to code is definitely important if you want to work directly in AI. But there are also a lot of other skills that will be valuable as AI gets more common. Things like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, communication, even emotional intelligence.
It seems like the important thing is to have a mix of skills, not just the technical stuff, but also things that machines aren't very good at.
Exactly. Machines are really good at doing repetitive tasks and working with data, but they're still not so great at things that require human judgment and empathy and creativity. Those are the areas where humans will always have an advantage, and those are the skills we need to focus on developing.
So how do we prepare for all this? If we know these are the skills that are going to be important, how do we make sure people have access to the education and training they need to learn them?
That's a really big question. And it's something that people all over the world who are in charge of education and workforce development are trying to answer. It means we need to rethink how we do education. We need to move away from the old way of doing things, rote learning and standardized testing. We need to focus more on personalized learning, where people can develop their creativity, their critical thinking skills, and become lifelong learners.
So we need a pretty big overhaul of our education system. It sounds like a huge challenge, but it also sounds like a really amazing opportunity to build something better.
I agree. It's a big task, but it's super important. The way we work is changing, and we need to make sure we don't leave anyone behind.
Okay, so we've talked about jobs and education. What about other ways that AI is affecting society? Are there any other big implications we should be thinking about?
Well, one area that's really important to consider is the ethics of AI. As AI systems become more powerful and more integrated into our lives, we need to make sure we're developing and using them responsibly.
Yeah, there are a lot of concerns about AI being biased, about privacy issues, and about whether it can be used for harmful purposes.
Those are all valid concerns. We need to be extremely careful to make sure that AI is developed and used in a way that benefits everyone in society. We need to make sure it doesn't worsen existing inequalities or violate basic human rights.
So it's not just about building cool new technology. It's about thinking about the bigger picture and making sure that AI is a force for good in the world.
Exactly. It's going to take a lot of different people working together, not just the tech experts, but also ethicists, policymakers, and the public. We need to have open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits of AI, and we need to work together to make sure it's used ethically and responsibly.
That's a really important point to remember. The future of AI isn't some predetermined thing. It's something we create through our choices, our actions, and our collective wisdom.
I couldn't agree more. The future of AI isn't something that's going to just happen to us. It's something we build together.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into South Korea's journey into the world of AI. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've covered a lot of ground, from the technological hurdles to the economic factors to the huge impact AI is having on society. But one thing is clear: South Korea's story is just getting started.
Definitely. It's a story full of challenges and opportunities and a sense of what's possible. And it's a story that resonates with everyone, not just in South Korea.
So for our listeners who have been with us on this journey, what's the one big takeaway you want them to remember?
Here's something to think about. As we move forward into this new world of AI, South Korea's experience offers valuable lessons for all of us as individuals and as a global community. Their challenges are our challenges, their opportunities are our opportunities, and their future is interconnected with our own.
That's a perfect note to end on. We're all in this together, and the decisions we make today will shape the future of AI for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.